The obsidian walls of the Grand Synod of Krell towered so high that the ceiling was lost in a suffocating mist of artificial atmosphere, a dark expanse that seemed to swallow the light of the floating gravity globes that illuminated the circular chamber. Here, in the heart of the Dominion, the air tasted of ozone and ancient dust, a sensory reminder of 1,000 cycles of unbroken conquest, where the breathing of the delegates echoed like the shifting of tectonic plates. High Exarch Vor, a creature of chitinous armor and multifaceted eyes that shimmered with the cold logic of a predator, looked down from the central dais, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm of profound irritation that sent ripples of anxiety through the gathered representatives of the subjugated systems. The holographic map projected in the center of the room was a sprawling web of red and blue, a visualization of the galaxy that the Dominion believed belonged to them by right of genetic superiority and technological supremacy. But there was a murmur in the hall, a vibration of dissent that had not been felt in centuries, a hesitation that stemmed not from the rebellion of the weak, but from the silence of the unknown. The topic of the cycle was not the suppression of the Orlean resistance, nor the resource extraction of the Outer Rim nebulas, but a singular, baffling anomaly that had appeared on the fringes of the charted void, a region of space where the laws of physics seemed to fold in on themselves, and where Dominion patrol fleets had simply ceased to report back, vanishing into a silence so absolute it felt like a physical weight upon the strategic cortex of the war room. Vor adjusted his posture, the biometallic fibers of his ceremonial robes groaning under the movement, and he cast his gaze toward the trembling ambassador of the Orlean Pact, a slender, avian-like being whose feathers were gray with the stress of impending extinction. The Orleans were a species of poets and atmospheric gliders, creatures who navigated by the magnetic winds of gas giants, utterly unsuited for the brutal calculus of void warfare. Yet here they stood, accused of harboring a weapon they could not possibly understand. Vor's voice, amplified by the acoustics of the chamber, rolled over the assembly like a landslide of gravel. He demanded to know the source of the interference in Sector 9, the location of the ghost signal that had blinded the Dominion's long-range sensor arrays, and turned the tactical grid into a chaotic mess of static and false positives. He accused the Orleans of purchasing illicit technology from the rogue traders of the Galactic Rim, perhaps even from the chaotic scavengers known as humanity, a species the Dominion had catalogued as Class D primitives. Industrious, yes, but fractured, emotional, and technologically stagnant, confined to kinetic weaponry and crude fission drives. The idea that humanity could be involved in the disappearance of a Dominion heavy cruiser squadron was laughable, a jest that Vor used to mock the desperation of the Orlean diplomat. The Orlean ambassador, whose name was Lysara, bowed her head, her voice trembling as she spoke into the translator disc, her words filtering through the harsh, guttural language of the Dominion with a softness that seemed out of place in the Hall of Warmongers. She denied the accusations, not with defiance, but with a terrifying honesty that unsettled the High Exarch more than any threat could have. She spoke of a legend among her people, a prophecy of the silent thunder, a force that would rise when the galaxy was on the brink of total darkness, a guardian that walked between the layers of reality. She admitted that her government had sent a distress call, a desperate, broad-spectrum cry for help directed into the blind void, aimed at no one and everyone, a final prayer before the Dominion's armada glassed their homeworld. She confessed that they did not expect an answer, certainly not from the chaotic humans, and definitely not in the form of the anomaly that now plagued the Dominion scanners. Lysara claimed they had seen nothing, only that the stars in Sector 9 had flickered, as if something massive had passed between the observer and the light, something that absorbed not just radiation, but attention itself. The laughter that erupted from the Dominion generals was harsh and metallic, a chorus of mockery that bounced off the high walls. General Krell, the supreme commander of the 3rd Conquest Fleet, stepped forward, his heavy combat chassis thudding against the floor plates. He was a massive specimen, scarred from 100 campaigns, his belief in the supremacy of Dominion dreadnoughts absolute. He dismissed the Orleans' talk of legends and ghost ships as the delirium of a dying culture. He projected a new image into the center of the room, a tactical scan of the Orlean homeworld, surrounded by the massive wedge-shaped hulls of the Dominion fleet. He read that there were no ghosts, only targets. He pointed out the pitiful human trade routes that skirted the edge of the conflict zone, noting their disorganized convoys and their reliance on primitive radio communications. To Krell, the humans were barely worth the ammunition it would take to purge them. They were scavengers picking at the scraps of empires, terrified of true power. He theorized that the anomaly was merely a malfunction in the Dominion's own sensor buoy network, a degradation caused by solar flares, and he requested permission to commence the final bombardment of Orlean Prime to silence the superstitious whimpering of their leadership once and for all. But as Krell spoke, the lighting in the Grand Synod flickered. It was a subtle variance, a dip in the voltage that should have been impossible in the heart of the Dominion's capital, powered by the Singularity core deep beneath the crust. Silence rippled outward from the center of the room as the holographic map distorted, the red icons of the Dominion fleet dissolving into static before reforming with erratic, glitching movements. A low hum began to permeate the air, not a sound heard with the ears, but a vibration felt in the teeth and the marrow of the bone. It was a frequency that bypassed the auditory nerves and resonated directly with the fear centers of the brain. The High Exarch stood up, his irritation turning to confusion as the master screens on the far wall, screens that displayed the live feed from the orbit of Orlean Prime, went black. Panic was a foreign concept to the Dominion elite, but the sudden loss of omniscience was a shock to their system. Then the screens flickered back to life, but the image had changed. The resolution was sharper, the contrast higher, as if the feed was being processed by a computer of vastly superior architecture. And there, in the high orbit of the Orlean world, hanging amidst the grand formation of the Dominion fleet, was a void. It was not a ship in the conventional sense. It was an absence of stars, a silhouette of absolute darkness that seemed to drink the light of the local sun. It had no running lights, no engine flare, no visible weapons ports. It was a jagged, brutalist slab of matte black composite that defied the sleek aesthetics of galactic design, a monolith of geometry that hurt the eyes to look at because the brain could not lock onto its depth. It sat motionless in the center of the Dominion formation, and the readout on the Grand Synod screens showed the impossible. Zero mass, zero energy output, zero life signs. It was a ghost. And yet its physical displacement was massive, eclipsing the Dominion flagship in sheer scale. The text scrolling rapidly down the side of the screen, translated from an unknown coding language, was not Dominion script. It was the blocky, utilitarian script of the Terran Coalition. The words were not a threat. They were a broadcast marker, a digital flag planted in the digital soil of the Dominion's network. The marker read, TCS Acheron Experimental Division, do not engage. General Krell roared an order into his comms unit, demanding the fleet open fire on the intruder, his logic overriding his fear. If it had mass, it could be destroyed. If it existed, it could be killed. The Council watched in breathless anticipation as the Dominion fleet, hundreds of warships bristling with plasma lances and antimatter torpedoes, turned their turrets toward the black void in their midst. The space around Orlean Prime lit up with the fury of a supernova as the fleet unleashed a volley that could crack the crust of a planet. Beams of coherent light slashed through the vacuum, missiles streaked like angry comets, and kinetic rounds the size of buildings were hurled at relativistic speeds. The sheer output of energy bleached the sensors white, blinding the Council to the result. For a long moment, there was only the blinding afterimage of destruction, and the High Exarch settled back onto his throne, satisfied that the glitch, the ghost, the human arrogance had been vaporized into its constituent atoms. But when the sensor filters cleared, the silence in the Grand Synod became absolute. The smoke of the energy discharge dissipated into the vacuum, revealing the TCS Acheron sitting exactly where it had been, untouched. The hull of the ship had not even glowed from the heat. There were no shield flares, no debris. It was as if the weaponry had passed through it, or around it, or perhaps the ship existed in a state of phase that rendered it immune to the crude interactions of matter and energy as the Dominion understood them. And then the ship moved. It did not accelerate, it simply relocated. 1 microsecond it was in the center of the formation, the next it was hovering directly above the bridge of General Krell's flagship, the Invictus, closer than any vessel should ever be to another. The proximity alarms in the Council chamber screamed, relaying the panic fro. The distant fleet. A voice cut through the confusion, overriding the encrypted military channels of the Dominion. It did not sound like the chittering of the Krite or the melodic tones of the Orlean. It was a flat, synthesized human voice, stripped of emotion, heavy with the weight of a tiredness that spanned centuries. "This is Captain Valerius of the Terran Coalition ship Acheron," the voice stated, the audio quality crystal clear, bypassing all jamming frequencies. We are conducting a field test of the phase shift logistics engine. You are disrupting our calibration. We request that you power down your weapons systems and withdraw from this sector immediately. Non-compliance will result in forced de-escalation. The sheer audacity of the demand stunned the High Exarch. A human captain commanding a ship that defied the laws of physics was treating a Dominion invasion fleet like a traffic obstruction. It was not a declaration of war. It was a noise complaint. General Krell, his face twisting with humiliation and rage on the tactical screen, screamed for his fleet to switch to graviton warheads, weapons designed to tear ships apart by creating localized singularities. "Burn them," he bellowed. "Crush them in their tin can." The Acheron did not wait for the volley. The dark hull of the human ship seemed to ripple, the matte black surface shifting like liquid mercury. "Compliance negative," the human voice said, sounding almost disappointed. "Initiating protocol, thunderclash." What happened next was not a battle. It was a dismantling. The Acheron did not fire cannons. It emitted a pulse. It was not an EMP nor a jammer. It was a resonant frequency broadcast that targeted the specific harmonic vibration of the Dominion's antimatter containment fields. Across the fleet, warning lights turned from red to critical violet. The engines of the Dominion ships didn't explode. They simply ceased to function as the magnetic bottles holding their fuel unstable lost cohesion, forcing the safeties to scram the reactors instantly to prevent a catastrophic breach. In seconds, the mighty armada, the pride of the Krite Ascendancy, was reduced to a collection of drifting metal hulks, powerless, dark, and freezing. The Invictus, Krell's flagship, drifted listlessly, its artificial gravity failing, its weapons offline. Then came the thunder. The Acheron accelerated, but it did not move through space, it moved space around itself. The visual distortion created a shockwave of gravitational shear that slammed into the shields of the drifting ships. It was a controlled kinetic impact, a slap from the hand of a giant. The Dominion ships were tossed aside, their formations broken, their hulls groaning under the stress. The Acheron wove through the chaos with impossible grace, a dancer moving through a frozen tableau. It positioned itself between the Orlean planet and the Dominion fleet, a shield of darkness against the stars. "Target capabilities neutralized," the human captain's voice returned, calm, steady, boring. "Casualty estimate 0. Dominion vessels, your life support will remain active on auxiliary batteries for 40 standard hours. We have transmitted your coordinates to your high command for retrieval. Do not attempt to re-engage. The Acheron does not fight. The Acheron resolves." In the Grand Synod, the silence was painful. High Exarch Vor stared at the screen, his mind struggling to comprehend the paradigm shift that had just occurred. The humans, the traders, the scavengers, the soft-shelled primitives, had just neutralized a conquest fleet without firing a single shot in anger. They had done it with the casual efficiency of an engineer flipping a circuit breaker. The Orlean ambassador, Lysara, had fallen to her knees, weeping softly, her eyes fixed on the black shape that shielded her world. She recognized the nature of the power not as magic, but as a level of scientific mastery that the Dominion had been too arrogant to even conceive. Screen flickered again, and the face of Captain Valerius appeared. He was a human of indeterminate age, his face lined with the stress of high-gravity living, his eyes possessing a frightening intensity. He wore a simple gray uniform unadorned by medals or gold braid. The background behind him was a dimly lit bridge, where crew members worked in hushed tones, their hands moving over holographic interfaces of immense complexity. There was no glory in his expression, only a grim sense of duty. "High Exarch Vor," Valerius said, looking directly into the camera, his gaze seeming to pierce the light years to find the alien leader in his high tower. "We apologize for the interruption of your politics. The Terran coalition prefers isolation. We prefer trade. We prefer to let the galaxy spin as it will. But the Orlean signal woke us, not because of their plea for help, but because the frequency they used. It matches the signature of something else, something we have been watching for." Vor found his voice, a rasping sound of indignation and fear. "You possess technology that violates the Treaty of Celestial Motion. You have weaponized subspace. The Dominion will not tolerate this. We will send the Grand Armada. We will scour your pathetic worlds." "You are missing the point," Valerius interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. "The Acheron is not a warship, Exarch. It is a mining vessel. We use the phase drive to crack neutron stars for core material. We use the gravity displacement to move asteroids. What you just experienced was our industrial equipment. You do not want to see what we built for war." The statement hung in the air, a sword of Damocles suspended by a single thread of logic. If a mining ship could disable a fleet, what could a dedicated human dreadnought do? The question terrified the Dominion Council more than the defeat itself. The psychological impact was devastating. The humans were not just powerful, they were restrained. They had held back the true extent of their capability, hiding behind a mask of mediocrity for centuries. Why? "We are inviting a delegation," Valerius continued. "Ambassador Lysara and you, High Exarch Vor, you will shuttle to the Acheron. We have matters to discuss that supersede your territorial squabbles. The scans we took of the Orleans sector during the engagement. They confirmed our fears. The silence in the void is not empty. It is approaching." The transition from enemy to reluctant diplomat was jarring for Vor. To board an alien vessel, a human vessel, was an admission of equality, if not inferiority. But the drifting hulks of his fleet left him no choice. He accepted. The shuttle ride to the Acheron was a journey into the belly of the beast. As Vor and Lysara approached the massive black ship, they saw the details that the long-range scans had missed. The hull was scarred and pitted, not from weapon fire, but from cosmic debris, from the friction of realities rubbing against each other. It looked ancient and new all at once. The docking bay was a cavernous space, filled with drones and repair skiffs that moved with insect-like precision. The atmosphere inside the ship was heavy, the gravity slightly higher than standard, a physical reminder of the density of the world the humans came from. Captain Valerius met them on the deck. In person, he was shorter than the High Exarch, fragile-looking without armor, but he carried himself with the density of a collapsing star. He led them not to a throne room or a negotiation table, but to the ship's stellar cartography lab. It was a room dominated by a massive, floating simulation of the galaxy, a swirling vortex of light. "We have been underestimated for a long time," Valerius said, walking through the hologram of a spiral arm. "We encouraged it. The Coalition realized long ago that if we showed our hand, we would be dragged into your wars. We would be forced to rule or be ruled. We wanted neither. We wanted to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Lysara asked, her voice barely a whisper. She sensed the answer in the coldness of the room. "For the Great Filter," Valerius replied. He gestured to the edge of the galactic map. "The Dominion believes power is about owning planets. You fight over dirt and rock. You measure strength in tonnage. But you are fighting in a sandbox while the tide is coming in." He manipulated the controls and the map zoomed out. Beyond the galactic rim, in the deep dark of intergalactic space, there were shadows, not ships but vast biological clouds, swarms. They were not visible to standard sensors, but the human ghost sensors, the phase shift technology, revealed them. They were eating the stars of the dwarf galaxies that orbited the Milky Way. "The signals the Orleans sent," Valerius explained, looking at Vor. "They used a harmonic that travels through subspace. It's the dinner bell. You rang it loud enough for them to hear. That is why the Acheron intervened, not to save the Orleans specifically, but to stop the noise, to silence the battlefield before the vibrations attracted the attention of the harvesters." Vor stared at the red blotches moving toward the galaxy. The scale was incomprehensible. The Dominion's armada, which he had thought invincible, was a speck of dust compared to the approaching storm. This is a simulation," Vor stammered, his worldview fracturing. "A trick to make us surrender." "It is telemetry," Valerius said simply. "Real time. They are 300 years out, maybe less if we keep detonating antimatter and shouting into the void. The Acheron is a scout. We have been building the wall in the Perseus arm for 2 centuries. Why do you think humans never expanded past the core systems? Why do you think we trade for raw materials we should be able to mine ourselves? We have been funneling every ounce of alloy, every energetic reaction, every brilliant mind into the shield fleets hiding in the dark. K nebulae. The revelation washed over the alien leaders. The humans weren't weak, they were busy. They weren't primitive, they were focused. While the Dominion and the rest of the galaxy played at empire, squabbling over borders and trade routes, humanity had been quietly, stoically building the fortifications for the end of the world. The Ghost Warship wasn't a weapon of conquest. It was a tool for survival, a shovel used to dig a trench. "We revealed ourselves today because we had to," Valerius said, his tone heavy with regret. "We broke our own prime directive of concealment because you were going to destroy the Orlean transmitter, which, if destroyed while active, would have sent a death scream echo that the harvesters would have locked onto instantly. We saved you to keep the galaxy quiet." Vor felt a sensation he had never experienced before, humility. He looked at the human, this soft creature who spoke of apocalypse with the calmness of a weather reporter. What do we do? Vor asked. It was the first time a high exarch had asked a human for direction. You stop fighting, Valeria said. The Dominion, the Orlean Pact, the syndicates, you end the wars, not because it's moral, not because it's right, but because we need your ships, we need your resources, we need your bodies on the line. The Coalition cannot hold the wall alone. We have the tech, we have the strategy, but we don't have the numbers. You love your tonnage, Exarch. Good. We're going to need every ton of steel you have. The Ghost Thunder Clash was not just a battle maneuver. It was the sound of a paradigm shattering. The silence that followed in the cartography room was heavier than the silence of the void. It was the silence of understanding. The petty grievances of the last 1,000 years evaporated in the face of the existential threat. The Orlean ambassador and the Dominion exarch looked at each other, not as enemies, but as fellow survivors on a life raft. Valerius turned off the map. The room plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the emergency strips on the floor. We will return your ships to you, Exarch. We will repair the damage to the Orlean grid. Then we will leave. We have a lot of work to do. If you are wise, you will follow us to the Perseus arm. If you are foolish, you will go back to your war. But know this, when the sky turns dark and the stars start going out one by one, do not pray to your gods. They cannot hear you. Call us. We will be there. The Acheron departed as quietly as it had arrived. It did not jump to hyperspace with a flash of light. It simply faded, the matte black hull dissolving into the background radiation of the universe, stepping sideways into the fold of reality where it dwelt. The Dominion fleet, systems rebooting, hung in the void, their weapons cold. General Krell on the bridge of the Invictus awaited orders to pursue, to track, to destroy. But the order never came. High Exarch Vor returned to the Grand Synod of Krell. The chamber was exactly as he had left it, the mist still swirling, the gravity globe still shining, but everything had changed. He looked at the map of the Empire, the red and blue lines that he had dedicated his life to expanding. They looked like scribbles of a child now. He looked at the generals, the politicians, the warmongers. They waited for his command, expecting a speech of vengeance, a declaration of total war against the human menace. Vor activated the main communication array, linking every world, every outpost, every ship in the Dominion. He also patched in the Orlean frequencies. He took a breath, the air tasting of ozone and the new, terrifying truth. Citizens of the Dominion, Vor spoke, his voice steady, stripped of the arrogance that had defined his rule. Stand down, cease all hostilities, the war is over. He paused, letting the shockwave of his words travel across the stars. We have been fighting over a candle while behind us a hurricane is gathering. Today we met the ghosts in the machine. They are not our enemies. They are the architects of our survival. Prepare the fleets, not for conquest, but for the long night. We are going to the Perseus arm. We are going to the wall. And in the silence of the void, far away from the politics and the posturing, the TCS Acheron drifted through the subspace currents, a lonely sentinel in the deep dark. Captain Valerius sat in his command chair, watching the telemetry from the distant galaxy edge. The red swarm was inching closer, a slow-moving tide of hunger. He rubbed his eyes, the fatigue of a lifetime settling into his bones. The humans had bought the galaxy time. They had revealed the ghost to save the machine. Now the real work began. The ghost thunder had clapped, and the echo would wake the galaxy or be the last sound it ever heard. But for the first time in centuries, Valerius felt a flicker of hope. They were no longer alone in the dark. The monsters were coming, yes, but the goes. Warship had recruited an army. And when the end came, humanity would meet it not with a whimper, but with the combined roar of a unified galaxy, standing shoulder to shoulder on the ramparts of the final frontier. The journey of the Acheron continued, slipping through the nebulas like a needle through black velvet. The crew, men and women born on station, generations removed from the soil of Earth, went about their duties with the quiet professionalism of those who know the stakes. They were the unsung, the unseen, the ghosts. They did not seek glory. They sought only to hold the line. And as the ship vanished into the slipstream, leaving only a ripple of gravitational distortion in its wake, the galaxy behind them began to turn, gears grinding into new alignments, ancient hatreds set aside for the preservation of light itself. The ghost warship shouldn't have existed, according to the laws of the Dominion. But it did, and because it did, there was a tomorrow. Deep in the engineering bay of the Acheron, the chief engineer, a woman named O'Connell with oil-stained hands and eyes that had seen too much radiation, adjusted the manifold of the phase drive. The hum of the engine was a lullaby to her. She looked at the readout, efficiency at 104%. The interaction with the Dominion fleet had provided valuable data on how their shields reacted to sheer stress. She logged it, encrypting the file under Allied defense protocols. She smiled grimly. Allied. It was a strange word, but as she felt the ship shudder, stepping through the membrane of reality once more, she knew it was the only word that mattered. The thunder had passed, the storm was coming, and the ghosts were ready. The philosophical implications of the encounter began to permeate the cultures of the Krite and the Orlean. In the weeks that followed, the story of the Black Ship spread not as a tale of military defeat, but as a myth of awakening. The Krite, obsessed with strength, found a new definition of it: restraint. To have the power to destroy and choose not to, that was a strength greater than any dreadnought. The Orlean, obsessed with spirit, found a physical manifestation of their guardians, the humans who walked in the spirit realm of subspace. Diplomatic channels that had been closed for centuries opened. Trade routes were established, not for profit, but for the exchange of strategic materials needed for the wall. The human factor became a variable in every equation. No longer dismissed as traitors, they were viewed as the silent custodians of the galaxy, the weary parents watching the children play, waiting to step in when the wolves arrived. And on Earth, in the subterranean cities beneath the recovering biosphere, the high command of the Terran coalition received the report from the Acheron. Admiral Holloway read the file, the light of the holopad illuminating his scarred face. He nodded slowly. "They took the bait," he whispered to the empty room. "They're mobilizing." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the vast shipyards that filled the Earth's cavernous underground, where ships 10 times the size of the Acheron were being welded together by the millions. The Acheron was a mining ship, true, but it was also a diplomat that carried a big stick. Holloway keyed the comms. "Phase 2 is active. Integrate Dominion and Orlean schematics into the defense grid, and tell Valerius, tell him good hunting." The galaxy was vast, dark, and full of terrors. But for the first time, the civilizations within it were looking in the same direction, guided by the ghost that shouldn't exist, the thunder that rolled without sound, and the enduring, terrifying, beautiful resolve of humanity. The ghost-thunder clash was over. The war for existence had begun.